Old School Bodybuilding Clothing Company. If you wish your fancy fitness center was a hardcore gym, you are old school. If you just ate chicken and rice and are about to eat chicken and rice, you are old school. OSBBC.com for the hardest training athletes.
I'm Dave Palumbo, founder of Species Nutrition. From my earliest bodybuilding days, I believed in only putting the best in my body. And that lives on in the Species Nutrition line of products. I put my name and reputation on every bottle of Species Nutrition products. If you want to be your absolute best, join the evolution.
All right, and we're back with another episode of Live with Dave Palumbo. I'm going to be your host today. This is another installment of the chapter. I'm Anthony Pasquale. Dave, welcome back to the show.
I love not having any responsibility. It's great. I just answer questions.
Yeah, and just so you know, I've been looking at everyone's comments as we go through this. So today, I promise everyone that's listening or watching this today that you're going to hear some stuff you've never heard before, so this should be good. It's going to be bodybuilding heavy in some areas, so for the hardcore fans, I think they're going to appreciate this. So my first question or first conversation I want to have with you, Dave, is I'm going to go back a ways. For a lot of people that don't know kind of the backstory of how you and I came together, how we met, I'm going to share upon that, and then I got a question for you. So once upon a time, I reached out to you. I sent you some pictures. You said, okay, this is what you have going on. Keep doing more of what you're doing, eat more protein, whatever. And about 6 months later, I came back to you. This was all over the phone. And you said, okay, you've made some improvements. And then you and I did a show together. You prepped me for the New York City Metropolitans back in 2011. And then after that, we worked together for 6 more months. And I'll never forget the day. It was like 4 o'clock in the morning. I got an email from you. And you said, hey, Anthony, we need to talk about what you're going to do next year because I think you have the ability to become get your pro card next year. So my question for you is, when you were training someone like me, because you were like, Tony, you could be the next kind of Evan Centopani.
Right.
When you looked at someone like Evan or someone like me or someone like a Juan, as someone that trains so many people, what are the telltale signs for you that someone can become a professional bodybuilder?
It's a good question. I also can't believe it's been 10 years since we first started talking, which just tells you how fast time flies. When I look at a picture of myself from when I was just started working out, I see a lot of like leanness and I'm ripped and I have a lot of veins and stuff like that. But I don't see any bodybuilding potential in terms of like winning the Olympia and stuff like that. It's amazing that what I did with my physique, through just sheer will and science and just hard, never give up type of training. But when I look at like a structure like yours or Evan, even like you look at a Jay Cutler, there's something just special about it. Like the width that you had, the taper, you had a small waist, you had the sweepy thighs. You can see just probably even as a kid, you probably had, even as before you started working out, you had that structure, and you can't replace that. You can't build that. That's there. Now, you could have all the genetic tool set to be a good bodybuilder, but not utilize it at all. And I think a lot of people don't, fully take advantage of what they're given. And sometimes they take it for granted because it just comes so naturally. They do well and they don't really ever, capitalize or exploit their gifts. Whereas someone like myself, who didn't really have a structural advantage over anyone, exploited, the ability to work hard and make sure that they can add as much muscle and bring in tremendous conditioning. So you had both because you had the work ethic plus you had the structure. So I figured, your abilities or your ability to go far in bodybuilding was unlimited. Your limitation was that you just mentally didn't want to go any further past a certain point. So that's a personal, decision. I just was telling you from a structural standpoint that I thought you had it. Evan Centopani, was unbelievable. Like if you saw the first show he ever did, the first show that he won, I think Atlantic States or something like that. I was sitting next to him in an airport. I just gotten out of jail, and it was the first show I was going to. We were in an airport together. I was sitting next to him, and I'm like, this kid's a pretty big kid. And then he's like showing me pictures. He's like, oh, you know, I said, you compete? He goes, yeah, I just won the Atlantic States. Now, I wasn't there because I was away in jail during that show. But you know, he showed me the pictures, and I'm like, holy mackerel, you look really good. I said, what do you want to do next? He goes, I don't know. What do you think I should? I said, you're going to be a pro. I said, you got to do junior nationals. And then we started talking. Next thing I know, I'm working with him. But I just knew that with him, it was going to be, you know, just plug the switch into the wall, and he's going to go very far. Now, he also put his own limitations on himself in a sense that he didn't really want to compete a lot, and you know, he had his, you know, he's a guy who's like really into his family, and that's fine. And I always respect people's own personal decisions, but you know, when you see a structure like that, just like when Brian Dobson saw Ronnie Coleman walk into Metroflex, he knew. He said, this guy doesn't even work out. He does like push-ups and pull-ups and, you know, and maybe bench presses. And the guy's got, you know, I see this structure. If he ever takes this to the nth degree, he could be the best. So there's something, you know, when you do this a long time, you get an eye for this type of stuff. And but it's based on bone structure, really, not as much muscle. Because no one starts out with a lot of muscle, you know. They start out with just, this is what I'm given from my genetics, and what do you think I could do with it? And so telling someone you can be Mr. Olympia just by looking at them is probably not the right thing to say to people, because Mr. Olympia requires a mindset too, not just a body. And that's why I think when we talk about Rami's got the physique to be Mr. Olympia, but does he have the mindset like a Jay Cutler or a Dorian Yates or a Ronnie Coleman or Dexter Jackson or Phil Heath? Does he have that mindset to be Mr. Olympia? We don't know.
Yep. I will second what you said. For people who've never seen it, if you take the 2 seconds and look on YouTube, you can see the video of Evan's first show when he did Atlantic States. It was ridiculously hard and big and great. I remember I actually sent it once to Jason Hunt. He's like, that was him at his first show. He goes, it's unbelievable.
Yeah, he almost looked better than he did like later. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it was ridiculous. Yeah. The next thing I want to ask you, and this, people are not going to believe this when they hear this, so for the hardcore Dave Palumbo RX Muscle fans, they can fact check this if they want. If they go back, I'm not sure if there's old episodes of Heavy Muscle Radio still on RX Muscle, but if people go back to, it would have been 2013, between February and April of 2013, you did a show with Aaron. And on that show, you disclosed how you had a client who thought they were taking, and people, do not try this, you're going to hurt yourself. You had a client who thought he was taking 3 IUs of insulin, and he was taking 30 every time. Yeah. But actually, I was actually using 10 units, but I was actually taking 100. So my question for you is, the first time I ever did it, Humulin R, I started with 50 units, and I ate a half a cup of oatmeal, and I would eat a half a cup of oatmeal every 3 hours. And eventually I worked my way up to 100 units of 100 units of insulin, Humulin R, with a half a cup of oatmeal every hour. How did I not die eating almost no carbohydrates, taking so much insulin for a year and a half?
Well, the guy I was talking about in that question I answered was not you. It was another guy, and he was on a ketogenic diet, and he was taking that, which is even crazy. I don't know how he died. And this guy was a big opiate user too. So I think the opiates was suppressing the, you know, that horrible feeling you get when you're on super low blood sugar, which could have killed him. But I think, you know, what people don't realize is that we have a very strong counter-regulatory hormone system in our body. What that means is that there's hormones that act opposite of insulin. So insulin's job is take the sugar in the blood, clear it, and put it into the cells. So if you have so much insulin around that you clear too much, your brain has no fuel source, right? And you can pass out, you can die, obviously. But when your pancreas senses that there's too little glucose in the bloodstream, it releases another hormone known as glucagon. And glucagon is produced by the alpha cells of the pancreas, where the insulin is produced by the beta cells. And when these alpha cells crank out glucagon takes any stored glycogen in the body and liberates it into the bloodstream as glucose, mostly from the liver. Also, there's another counter-regulatory hormone produced by the adrenal glands known as cortisol. We don't know what that is. It's obviously, it could break down, it's a catabolic hormone, but its real job in the body is to maintain blood sugar levels when sugar drops too low. And that's why before they do surgery on you, they always want to make sure your cortisol levels are working properly, because that can be dangerous if they're not. Now, cortisol will turn, it won't take stored glycogen and put it into the bloodstream. It'll actually create new glucose from amino acids, known as the process being gluconeogenesis. So you have these two processes going on. So you're taking these massive amounts of insulin. You're not eating enough carbohydrates for the insulin to have enough glucose to push in, and all this insulin is looking around for more glucose, so that your liver's cranking out, glucose from the stored glycogen. Your cortisol is producing more glucose from amino acids, and your body's obviously able to compensate for that. And if you're doing it regularly, your body will kind of get used to the whole process. Doesn't mean it's a good kind of stress to put your body under, but your body can handle it. This guy who who did this 30 units of insulin 3 times a day, and do not do this at home, and was on a ketogenic diet, he was shredded. He was absolutely shredded. And, probably because his body was pulling any kind of stored glycogen and constantly pushing it into the bloodstream. But he could have been also very catabolic too, because of the fact that his body's cortisol levels are probably through the roof. So while it's not a safe thing to do, these built-in safety mechanisms that your body have prevent death in situations like this. The problem is, if you would have given yourself like 2 or 3 cc's, which would have been 200, 300 units of insulin. And remember, Humulin R is not super fast acting, so it doesn't release everything at once. It releases it over initially half of it, and then the other half in like 2 to 2.5 hours. So that also helped. But if you would have taken like a Humalog shot, like of 200-300 units, you'd be dead, because there's no way your counter-regulatory hormones could have compensated for the severe drop in blood sugar and the ensuing death of your brain. So, and people have died that way by accident, and there's been murders that have been committed that way by people injecting massive amounts of insulin into the body because they think it's not a poison, it's something that's endogenously in there, and a lot of times they can get away with it. Nowadays they know to check for that, and they can check insulin levels and blood sugar and all that stuff. But yeah, I mean, basically your body saved you.
Yeah, and I discovered it because when I switched, I was doing the protocol that you would implement with most people in mass off-season stuff, because we never used insulin, just like you do with people now. Right. We never used insulin pre-contest.
Right.
And, but later on, I tried some of the the standard Milo style, where you're doing you're doing pre, intra, post. Right. And once I started doing 100 units pre, intra, post with only 100 carbs, that's when I thought to myself, why am I having a problem here? And because of the Humalog. That's how I discovered it.
And just as to preface, you're a smart guy. Like, you're not a dumb guy. I mean, you understand math. It wasn't an ignorance thing. It just didn't register. The great thing about insulin is that, and I'm going to give you something good thing, and I'm going to give you something confusing. Insulin syringes, whether they be 1 cc, half cc, 3/4 cc's, they all measure insulin units. So if it says 10 or 5 on an insulin syringe, that means that's 5 insulin units. That's why insulin's pre-mixed, because it's pre-mixed purposely so that you don't have to think about anything. Now, if you're taking growth hormone that's in a powder form, depending on how much water you add to the powder, you have to figure out the mathematics of how many units. You can't use an insulin syringe to measure growth hormone units, because it's not standard. However, there are some insulins out there now that are what they call U200 or U300 insulins, meaning that they're like 2 or 3 times the strength. But those insulins come in pens usually, and they usually have their own measuring system on them. So you would just dial up how many IUs you want on the pen and use it. So you wouldn't have to even you're not using an insulin syringe. If you were to actually draw up that insulin out of the pen and into an insulin syringe, you would have to compensate for that fact that they're 3 times stronger. So we're talking about U100 insulins, which are anything that comes in like a 10 cc bottle, you got to draw it, that's a U100 insulin. But like I said, if you get pens, some of the pens are U200 or U300 insulins. Like I think the Toiho, which is like a long-acting insulin, comes in these 300 unit pens. So like I said, if you were to draw them up with an insulin syringe, you would have to compensate for that, because otherwise if you took a regular dose, you'd actually be taking 3 times more than you think you're taking.
And for people, I don't know if you have any stories of, because you with Humulin R, you might have been on top of it, but because I was taking so much, I do have, because once again, people, it's funny, but it was really dangerous. I mean, there was multiple times where I would kind of go into these like dream states. One time I took Oreos and I put them in the stove and made like a castle. Another time I berated a telemarketer. Another time I woke up with like 2 loaves of bread all over the floor, and like I knew I had a stomachache, or I'd eat whole boxes. I did not remember. My friend was doing the same protocol with me. His girlfriend walked on him chewing on a sock. So people like don't realize you can lose your mind.
Yeah, well, it's funny because when I used to date Colette, she was a type 1 diabetic, and sometimes she would start talking gibberish to me, and I'm like, what the fuck is she talking about? And then I said, did you check your blood sugar? And sure enough, it would be like 40 or something like that. She would, because you get a little kooky when that happens, Yeah,
you end up losing your mind with it. So my next question for you is, and that's a great segue with actually when you mentioned someone like Colette. Obviously, bodybuilding, things like that is a tremendous amount of sacrifice, a lot of selfishness and stuff like that. Did you ever question or doubt yourself with it? Meaning, like, were there times where, was it something you had to be aware of where, oh, I want to go on a date or I do this? Like, did you ever have that inner struggle, or can you speak to that for people that maybe they're afraid to be alone or maybe they compromise? Yeah. Like, how did you navigate the dating waters as a bodybuilder?
I like people, hang out with like people, right? I mean, you kind of date and hang out in social circles with the people that you're kind of do the same thing you do and have the same interests. Especially as a bodybuilder, you really can't, date someone who doesn't understand the whole. I mean, think about if you're a bodybuilder and you're 280 or 300 pounds and you're on, taking anabolic steroids, you're eating 8 times a day, and you go and meet some girl in the supermarket who's never ever gone into a gym, and she's like, she's like a lawyer or something like that. And you go out on a date with her, and you guys, hey, you can hit it off, you guys like each other, whatever. How do you explain to her what you're doing? How do you even broach the subject of that? Like, by the way, I take 1,000 milligrams of testosterone a week. I'm taking, 600 milligrams of equipoise. I'm injecting, growth hormone into myself every morning, and insulin. And I got to go to the gym, 2 hours a day. And every time, if you're going to hang out with me for a weekend, I'm going to be eating every hour and a half. So. It's a nutty. No one could deal with it. It sounds glamorous at first, but it's really not. If you're not into it. Now, if you're into it, if the girl's like competes and everything like that, she's gonna think it's great. Hey, I got a guy I can go to the gym with. We can train. We can go eat every couple hours together. This is great. He has his own supplement line. So that you mesh with the people who mesh with you, so to speak. And that's why I think when a lot of people break up, when they stop competing, sometimes their relationships deteriorate because now the dynamic is not the same anymore. Like Dorian Yates said it, when he was married, he had his kid. When he stopped competing, him and his wife broke up. I think that whole relationship. Greg Kovacs comes to mind, a very good friend of mine, may rest in peace. Him and his wife were like codependent on each other. She cooked all his meals. She organized all his business, things. He had to go on all his guest posings and appearances, and when he stopped competing, it's like they had nothing in common anymore, and they broke up. So I think we attract who we need or who we are at the time, and then when you change, sometimes those relationships break down because now they're not based on the same thing. Maybe one person is still doing the bodybuilding and the other person isn't, and now they just doesn't work anymore.
As someone that was in that 300-pound range in the late 90s and then after 2000, for people that are unaware, a lot in the world changed within the bodybuilding performance-enhancing steroid world once the Barry Bonds, Balco, Mark McGuire stuff all happened. So Dave, as someone that was big before that and big after that, did you notice a difference in the way either people treated you or the way conversations would go as someone that was pre and post Balco steroid world where everyone all of a sudden became an expert overnight?
The great thing, and I'm sure you know this too, the great thing about being like, a really big muscular guy is that no one's really going to say anything to your face. Everyone always asks, did you get any fights when you're that big? No, because who's going to fight me? You'd have to be a nutcase too. And I'm a nice guy anyway, so like, I'm not going to walk around and be an ass to people. So they're going to see this big, jolly green giant, so to speak, who's just a really nice guy. And no one's going to start with me purposely, because of that. I had a drunk neighbor, you start yelling at me one day or something like that, steroids, something like that. And I literally, with one finger, I poked him in the chest. And the guy was like on the floor, like saying he's going to call the cops. And I'm screaming at him. I mean, that was like the extent of like a fight I got into. So no one messes with you, I think, at that point. So I don't know, but I think, yeah, when I would walk through the mall, people would mutter stuff under their breath. I never listened to anything, but my ex-wife, she used to always like say "fuck you," and she'd yell at these people if she heard them say steroids, that kind of thing. But most people were really cool about it, and I think that a lot of people respect it. A lot of people came up to me and asked me, how to eat right. I'm sure you get this stuff all the time too. How to eat right, and what supplements they should be taking, and I saw you in this magazine, or nowadays it's like I see you on YouTube or something like that. So there's usually a pretty good respect. I think if you're a good guy, a good person, and you help people and you put it out there, out a lot of information, I think people respect that. I think there are some big guys that do live up to the stereotype of a big meathead, and unfortunately those people ruin it for the rest of us. And some people are just assholes in general, and they're bigger assholes when they're on steroids and they're weighing 250, but that's the same thing. There's skinny people that are like that. There's drunken people that are like that, and so I don't know if I didn't notice any change. What I did notice was the political environment changed over the years in terms of. In 1990, when they enacted that Steroid Control Act, I had just, like maybe a year or two after that, I started using steroids, and there was nothing to be found. There was no steroids. They were like, it went from people being able to get them easily to nothing, and so we had to resort to getting stuff from Europe, and that was a big, and then that opened up for many years. It was probably for about a good 5-year run like that, and then I think 9/11 happened. And then it was really dried up, after 9/11, because now no one can bring stuff in from Europe anymore. And then the Mexican connection became much more prevalent. And then I got out. I stopped in 2004 competing, so I stopped. I didn't eat anything. And that's when it got bad. That's when underground stuff started coming up. And you didn't know what was real and what wasn't. There was no Roy test kits like, I have now on DavePalumbo.com to buy and test stuff. So you were kind of just guessing if the stuff was good. And I think for a good... Even up to now, really, I think it's progressively gotten worse because people realize that people are desperate. Everyone wants gear, and they'll just put test propionate and all the injectables to put Dianabol and all the orals, and most people won't know the difference. Most people will get results because those drugs work, and if they ruin a few women's lives with it, who cares? And it's about making money now. And I think now with COVID and lockdowns and people are desperate, there's a lot of crap out there, and I see it all the time because I sell these test kits on my website, and then people email me and say, hey, what do you think of these results? And I'm telling you, I'm seeing stuff is fake left and right. Most of the injectables are test propionate, most of the orals are Dianabol, and while there is some good stuff out there, I would say 75% of the stuff is either not what it says it is. And I would say probably, I hate to say this, probably 30% of stuff is zero, is nothing. But most of the fakes are, like I said, propionate or Dianabol. And that's disheartening for these bodybuilders because they don't know what they're taking, if it's good or not. Or, I can't tell you how many people I help contest prep, and I just have to tell them, I don't think you're on anything. You look like you're natural, or I don't think these clenbuterol fat burners are working, and then they'll test those because I have a tester for that. And it's nothing in there, and so it's a frustrating time because you know what? It's bad enough you got to put black market stuff into your body to begin with, and you don't know what you're taking. It's even worse when what you're taking is not even what it says it is. That's why I just don't understand why they just don't legalize the stuff and enable these people to get stuff through a doctor if they want to. I'm not saying they need to have the whole array of anabolics, but they should be able to get like testosterone and decadurabolin and growth hormone by prescription if you want to pay for it. And they want to put a premium tax on it, let them. Who cares? At least people are not going to be hurting themselves,
Yeah, it's funny. I haven't thought about it in a while. I'm like, well, how was I able to navigate those waters? And now I remember, because I hadn't thought about this stuff in 10 years, but I used to, the Anabolic Reviews Guide. I used to get like the book, and then you'd go and like match it up and make sure your DECA had the right international pharmaceutical symbol.
Right, but that's when they actually had real companies. Now there's nothing. There are no real companies. Everything is pretty much people are making it in their basement. So you can't even match up anything anymore. You have to actually test the stuff now with the Roy test kits to see what's in there. And luckily, the new ones coming out, we have some semi-quantitative tests that will actually, after you test the testosterone and the DECA and the Trenbolone, if it's real, you could actually then test it for what the milligrammage is on it to see if you're even getting a potent dose of anything anymore.
Wow, no, that's good to know. I haven't thought about that in ages. I will say one thing, though. When you talk about the stories with the people, I have a quick one where one time I was at a red light in like my little piece of shit Honda Civic, and some guy got into a little tiff with me. So I got out of my car, and he looks at me, and I was pretty big at the time, like 278. I was big at the time, not even pretty big. I was big. And I get out of the car. He looks at me. He flips his car in reverse and goes, "Why don't you go shove another needle in your ass, asshole?" And then he flips it in the reverse. So yeah, the point is you get used to the stigmas for sure. Question for you. I thought about this one. You know, for people that don't know you or don't know me a lot behind the scenes, or a lot of other people, intense people don't even know they're intense. That's just their demeanor.
Yeah.
And by default, they gravitate towards other intense people. So people who don't know you and I, the way we interact, the way we talk right now is how we talk. If I'm sitting there with you, we're talking about fish oils and fiber, and I'm talking about mushrooms, and like we talk about the exact same stuff that you talk about on your YouTube channel. So my question for you is, you've talked to a lot of intense people by default. Of all the people you've talked to through this bodybuilding industry, who is the most intense bodybuilder you have ever met?
That's a good question. You know, I would probably say that, you know, back in the 90s, I probably would have said I was, you know, because I was pretty consumed with it. You know what I mean? I wanted to know every nuance of how every drug worked. I was asking so many questions. I had a doctor friend who was a very important mentor in my life. May he rest in peace also, Dr. Mike. And we would have, I mean, literally, I swear to you, and I'm not making this up, I'm not exaggerating, he had a key to a gym. He was a crazy person too. He would train at like 2 in the morning, he'd go like from like midnight to like 2 in the morning, sometimes 3 in the morning at this gym. He would do countless sets. He had the key. And I would meet him. This was up in Westchester. It was in Portchester, New York. I was living up in Westchester at the time because I was going to med school. And I would literally hang out at this gym with him for hours, and we would just talk about anabolics and how they work and our theories about, you know, estrogen blockade and aromatase inhibitor. Before anyone knew any about this stuff, we would talk about, you know, theories about how, you know, what anabolics were best to stimulate what, how to be anti-catabolic, how to neutralize cortisol. I mean, I don't even remember all the conversations, but I was so obsessed with understanding the science and what was going on to have such a grasp. And all the stuff I teach everyone, you know, these days all came from these conversations that we had. And it was like I was like in an intense, like I was in medical school, but then I was like in another program with him at night, you know, to learn even more. But they don't teach us stuff in medical school, obviously. But this guy had a photographic memory. So he had graduated from medical school 20 years earlier, same school I did. He was the valedictorian, and he remembered everything from school. So I would be like, he'd be like, what, you know, we would talk about what I learned that day. We went over this and that. He would be telling me stuff like he would just read the textbook yesterday. It was unbelievable. I'm like, I can't believe you remember all that stuff. Yeah, I don't forget anything, he used to always say. So I was probably the most intense person for a good 5 to 8 years, I would say. I don't think anyone was more intense because I didn't miss a workout. I didn't miss a meal. I was on top of whatever the latest drug protocols were. I knew where the best places to get stuff was. You know, I had the best source, you know, because that was all that mattered to me. And so who's like that today? I guess, you know, Boston Lloyd was pretty extreme, you know, but he doesn't really, you know, competing is not really that important to him. So I can't really put him into that, you know, into that category. He's just consumed with the anabolic aspect of it. You know, as far as competitors go, Guy Cisternino is pretty damn intense. I got to tell you, I don't know too many people that are as intense and detail oriented. Like he would be when I helped him when he won nationals. He was calling me and asking me if he can go to take a crap. I mean, he's like, I got to go to the bathroom. I'm like, well, go. He's like, I just wanted to make sure it's okay. I said, oh, you can go. Yeah, it's fine. So he was pretty intense, you know, that, and I like that about him because he didn't leave a single detail. He journaled everything that he ever ate, and when he went to the bathroom, when he went to the gym, what sets he did. Everything was journaled, and I've never seen anything like it. Probably Milos was kind of like that too back in the day. He was pretty intense. When him and I would, we went to Dubai in 1996. When we spent that week together, that was not also nonstop, talk about not only just drugs, but diet and competing and just everything related to bodybuilding. So he was, and that's why, look, he's still that way today. And Milos is another guy who has a photographic memory. He'll remember what he took in 1992 for the Mr. British Grand Prix, type of thing.
A guy from a bird's eye view who always came off as very intense to me, just from looking at pictures. And then the few times I passed by him or I saw him having conversations with other people was Rich Gaspari. Every time I saw him, he looked like he was going to throw someone through a wall. I was just like, holy shit.
Yeah, well, he was intense in the gym. I don't know about I guess at the time he was also into nutrition and diet and stuff like that. I don't know how deep he got into it, but yeah, he was intense about his training, no doubt about it.
Yep.
I mean, Dorian Yates was probably one of the most intense guys of all time too. So.
Yep. Final question here for you today. I got for you is I'm not, because you already alluded to it before. I'm going to start with myself as an example because maybe you don't suffer from this, but I have a pet peeve where first off, I hate when people ask me what I do. To me, that's like the most unoriginal. It just gets under my skin when someone's like, if I'm at the mall or whatever, I'm anywhere I am. People go, so what do you do? To me, I just hate that question. But how do you answer that question? And do you ever say, oh, I have a YouTube channel, and someone goes, oh no, I never heard of it. Does shit like that get under your skin? Because stuff like that gets under mine.
No, what I say to people now is, which is easier than when I was bodybuilding. Because when I was bodybuilding, I don't even know how to explain what I did. But I just tell people I own a nutrition company. And sometimes I have to explain what that means. Vitamins, protein powders, fat burners. Oh, okay. And I just leave it at that. I don't even, and then if they start asking me more questions about it, I might say, I also have a very popular YouTube channel. I don't even go into what rxmuscle.com. I just say, you do? Yeah. Because most people understand social media these days.
Yep.
Or I have a popular Instagram, how many followers you have? I have 100,000 or 102,000. If you say I have 100,000 followers, people think that that's impressive nowadays. I hate to say that it's kind of pathetic in a way, but if you say you have 100,000 followers, people think you're important.
Yeah. It's like, that's big revenue. You're like, yeah. No, not necessarily.
Not necessarily, no. Not unless you use. I know girls that stick their ass out in the air and have 1 million followers, and they're not making any money from that, other than the fact that they could say I have 1 million followers,
Yep. Well, I think that's going to wrap it up for today.
I want to just add one thing because Anthony has a great line of products, vavalife.com. And I'm taking them all. I want to just tell you, one of them is to keep me from going senile, the product wisdom, and then Monad I take on a regular basis. And I want to just tell people my experience with it. I had this foot fungus on my toe, not on my feet. I had a toenail fungus for like 15 years. It wouldn't go away, and I took the product and on a regular basis. I take it every day. So I wake up in the morning, I take it. I just take it once a day, and I'm telling you the toenail fungus went away. I will say one thing, Anthony, it went away completely. And you know what? My doctor couldn't even believe it. My dermatologist, he said, what'd you take? I said, I took this product and it went away. And he's like, really? I said, yeah. Now, what I'm going to tell you what happened was it grew back out of nowhere. And I don't know if I didn't take it long enough. I'm still taking it, but not at the higher dosage. I don't know if maybe there was a little bit left and I probably should have taken it longer. But it came back, the thing. But it definitely disappeared. The toenail was completely clear. I couldn't believe it.
Well, it could be like my only thought, because we haven't obviously discussed any of this, but because the product's designed for any sort of viral infections, including things like cold sores. So 70 to 85% of the time, if someone takes 3 capsules, 4 capsules, especially if they have a lip eruption or whatever, it's going to get rid of it. It doesn't always get rid of, because certain viruses we kind of keep with us for the rest of our lives, if you will.
Well, this is a fungal infection, so it's not really a virus. So maybe it's not as effective.
Yeah, funguses and viruses both. You're right. I'm using that interchangeably, but it would make sense that sometimes it can suppress things, but not fully eliminate them if they're things that are kind of part of us moving forward. But that's good to know.
But it's only my toe. It's not any place else. It's just my toenail. It's the one toenail. It's the weirdest thing. But it completely grew out the toe. I couldn't believe it. It was like a miracle. So anyway, my point is, guys, if you do have like any kind of like cold sores or like any kind of immune issues, these mushrooms tend to be, they regulate your immune system really well. And the products are tremendously pure. I know your Lion's Mane product, you have that, what is that, Connection product for mental awareness. I take the Wisdom product, which has everything in it, because I figure I need everything I can get. But there's a cheaper version that just has Lion's Mane in it called Connection, right?
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, most people might say, well, I see Lion's Mane on the shelves. Like, what's the difference between your Lion's Mane and someone else's? And as I always tell people, it's like you say with species stuff. I'm into this because I'm passionate about it. It's like I make it's my obsession where not all Lion's Manes created equal. So even on a surface level, what someone would say, if I buy your Lion's Mane, why would it work better? 2 reasons. One, it's organic. I get the best lion's mane in the world. It comes from Tibet. And I combine it with ginger because ginger allows it to cross the blood-brain barrier. You got to make sure you can absorb stuff. Otherwise, it's kind of useless.
Right. Otherwise, you're wasting your time.
And mushrooms, see, what makes mushrooms work well is that they have mycelial connections with them, right? But when you grow them in a lab on brown rice or on, generic materials, they don't have that 2, 3, 4, or 500 years of history of those networks. And it's those networks that your body uses to repair and restore itself. So and that's just the reality is not even 3 companies in the world that are using these kinds of mushrooms. I know that because I buy most of them. Me and one other guy, a Host Defense, we're the only ones. So the point is the other stuff's dog shit. I mean, that's just the way you're going to get what you pay for. And you'll notice a big difference after a month. You'll notice it before you finish a month.
I love the product. And we have a special RX Muscle code, right? What's the code again?
I think it's just RX Muscle.
RX Muscle, and that's what, 15% off?
Yeah, it's 15% off. Yeah, and once again, if people don't like it or you think it's full of shit, we'll give you 100% return. I always give money back, and I kid you not, I have never even had a return in 9 months. We've never talked about it. Yeah. I've never even had one return in 9 months, even with 100% guarantee.
Yeah, this stuff is great. It's Vava Life, VAVA Life.com. Check it out. RX Muscle, 15% off. And that's all I got to say.
Cool. All right. Well, that's going to be it until our next episode. And that's it for Anthony Pasquale and Dave Palumbo signing out.